afternoon. I'm Molly Tower, moderator for the 5th lecture in our series presented by outstanding fine arts faculty members at Texas State University. Our seminar topic is Inspired by Art, Traditional and Non-Traditional Uses of Art to Impact Society. Please enter your questions and comments in the Q&A box, and I will share them with our speaker at the end of the presentation. Today's presentation has the captivating title of Creativity. Where does it come from? We are honored to have as our presenter, Professor Hank Hehmsoth from the School of Music. With a 4-decade career as a performer and composer, Hank has played over 10,000 performances. He was a member of the Christopher Cross Group, which won 5 Grammy Awards, as well as an Academy Award for Best Song. He also toured with the Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, and Bonnie Raitt. And now I'm excited to turn the program over to Professor Hehmsoth.
Thank you, Molly. Hi, everybody. I'm Hank. I'm a jazz piano professor of practice at Texas State University. That title is somewhat of a rarity. It means I was invited to teach, not based on my academic resume, but from my experiences and success in the field. You know who else is a recent professor of practice? Matthew McConaughey is here at UT. We are here to teach students how to find work and contribute to the world outside of academics in the real world. Now, I'm a pianist. Well, I'm a jazz pianist for the last 40 years, and I've been a composer, and lately I'm a researcher and a historian. I never thought that would happen. So what am I? I guess I'm primarily all of the above, and they are related. They're kind of developed in a linear fashion since 50 years ago. So I've got slides and photos and videos to share with you. So let's get started. So before I jump into explaining the creative process, I'd like to share a video. The last 15 years, I'm the pianist in a Grammy-nominated 10-piece jazz band in Austin called Times 10. We play at the Elephant Club, one of the oldest jazz clubs in America, down on 4th and Congress here in Austin. Every guy in the band is a world-class soloist and jazz improviser, and we play only original music. Last summer, of course, in the middle of COVID, our fans were saying they missed us. We couldn't play anywhere. We hadn't played since March 2020. So we all collected together and made this video. Each guy recorded himself at home on his phone and sent those videos to me, and I put this video together as the video producer. Each guy plays a solo, and this may strangely sound strange, but we never heard each other or the complete music until this video was done. So here's the piece. It's called Basement Panorama.
John Mills, Times 10.
So that's times 10. Upon seeing this, Terry Lacona is a friend of mine. He's the producer of Austin City Limits. And he told me, Hank, this video is great. It's really well done, very creative. We hope to be back playing live again starting this August. So, like most people my age, I'm 68. When we get to this age, one of the coolest things we have is a collection of great stories, and I have my share of them. I had dinner with Lauren Bacall. I gave piano lessons to the great actor Jack Lemmon. I filled in and subbed for Count Basie when he had the flu with his big band at the Texas Union Ballroom back in 1975, I think. I had lessons with the amazing composer Aaron Copland. I was backstage with Burt Bacharach, Barbra Streisand, and Frank Sinatra at the Academy Awards. I hung out with Dizzy Gillespie. I've played Christmas carols with Governor Ann Richards at the Governor's Mansion. I did Gershwin jazz duets with opera star Beverly Sills. So I've got a lot of names to drop. Dred Skelton, Bob Hope, David Letterman, Sinatra and the Nelson Riddle Orchestra, the Comedians, Steve Allen, Sid Caesar, and like Molly mentioned, I was a year on the road with the Eagles, another year tour with Fleetwood Mac. I also collaborated with the great dancer Mikhail Baryshnikov at the grand opening of the UT Performing Arts Center. Was that 1983 maybe? I was backstage with Michael Jackson at the World Pop Music Festival in Tokyo. And lest I forget, my date with Charlie's Angels, Cheryl Ladd. So if you're interested in any of these stories, just remember and ask me again during the questions at the end. So on to what I am. I grew up from age 3 at the piano. I remember being so small I could stand on the piano pedals and my nose was just at the level of the keyboard. I remember looking down and seeing this sea of white notes both directions, and I could barely touch those black notes. My legs were so short they dangled in the air on the piano bench. My dad told me I was reading music before I learned to read English, and in that sense, music is my first language. My degrees from UT are in classical piano. My teacher in the 1970s was the famous artist in residence, Sir John Perry. You know, we plunged into Beethoven. He told me that because I was his student, I stood in a direct line of descendants of Ludwig's performance practice. But when I had played much of the classical repertoire, Beethoven, Bach, Chopin, 20th century composers like Ravel and Stravinsky, I got to the point where I wanted to be more creative, more freer, to play with my own ideas, to expand my piano and to play more often. I wanted to play with people. I didn't want to just practice all year long just to come out and play 2 concerts a year. So I also thought I was the hotshot piano player. I knew I could play anything written or put in front of me. But what I could not figure out was what jazz pianists were doing, like Bill Evans, Herbie Hancock, Chick Corea. It wasn't written, so what were they doing? I know the keyboard. I know I liked it, but I couldn't find the notes or those sounds they were playing at the keyboard. So what was up with that? You know, there's hundreds of books about jazz. Most of them are bad and dead ends. So I did my research, and that's an important word, research. I went instead to the source, New York. I learned jazz at the Eastman School in Rochester, New York. When I got back, my decision was to do whatever it took to succeed at being a freelance musician. You know, one thing about being a freelance musician is how creative you need to be in order to just find jobs. It's hard for me to remember all the things I've done for 50 years. So that are somehow tied to music. So I made a list. I was the accompanist for the Austin Choral Union and an acoustic engineer at Tracor. I've judged jazz festivals. I'm an arranger and an artist manager. I'm an NEA program specialist. I started my own company. I'm a clinician, a published composer, band leader, and conductor. I did a summer in the Mediterranean on a cruise ship. I teach at college. I've done documentaries, film, and TV, hundreds of weddings. I write grants. I'm a historian at Rutgers. I'm a sponsored artist by Straight Music, and I've done master classes. I'm a trainer for the United States Army Band and developed music applications. I write a byline for the Jazz Journalist Association. I own my own ASCAP publishing company. I've worked for Broadway across America. I'm the film, jazz, and pop pianist for the Austin and San Antonio symphonies. I've even tuned pianos at UT. I do Broadway shows. I recruit. I'm the pianist at the Riverbend Church. I'm a session recording artist for records and write jingles. I've worked in film. I've been a summer camp director, and I've toured the world for Warner Communications. And lately, I'm a video producer. So, in one sense, that was creativity right there, just finding work. Heaven knows there's a lot of degreed musicians that end up in entirely different occupations. I know bankers and especially a lot of lawyers here in Austin with music degrees. My college roommate, Miles Braffett, graduated with a degree in trombone, and now he's vice president for the Sony Corporation in New York City. So I was making it. I was a studio session musician by day. I was playing 6 nights a week and here in Austin at all kinds of clubs. Does anybody remember Casablanca's or out at Lakeway Yacht Club? I was the tech support person for music software, and I generally felt like if something had 5% to do with music, I was all in. So over the years, pursuing creativity in my playing, in my writing, in my finding work, I became more aware of how inspiration and creative endeavors get started. So where does inspiration or creativity come from? You know, nobody had directly ever asked me that question before 2010, just 10 or 11 years ago. I was just immersed in doing things, writing and performing. Then, in preparation for a magazine article, feature writer Billy London Gray contacted me. She wanted to debunk the myths around inspiration and creativity. Her article was much more about how research inspires creativity. She wanted me to look objectively at what I was doing. So, you know, artists and poets have for centuries talked about the muse. The muse is the source of inspiration, and it's often been seen as some kind of dark supernatural force, but actually it can be anyone around you or something as mundane as a photograph or a little walk in the park. I found that my personal interest in something I've lived and experienced, because something becomes something I want to research, making everything more interesting with more detail, all springing from a backstory, how connections are made and how it all becomes inevitable, unique, because of the singular personality in each of us. I know that I can sustain the effort to create if I have a personal stake in it. So I try my best to find essential things I've enjoyed and lived through and use them to become the start of ideas. I use what's most familiar and what I consider my own. So I want to ask you, who is your muse? Take a minute to think of the people you know. Who makes you feel inspired? Is there someone you chat with over coffee and you find yourself rushing home full of creative energy? If there is, that person is your muse. And you don't just need to have only one. Artist Pablo Picasso considered every woman he had a relationship with in his life his muse. It may be simply that going out and socializing is a good way to get inspired. What people fail to recognize, though, is that hard work, practice and habit, and research play much bigger parts in the creative process. With that in mind, I would like to take you through my personal creative journey with one piece of music I worked on in 2011. Look, I just love New Mexico. I've traveled, I've hiked, I've skied, I've walked, I've visited everywhere there is to go in New Mexico. The Georgia O'Keeffe Art Gallery, Indian reservations at Taos, the Grand Plaza in Santa Fe, the Tent Rocks National Park that Clinton authorized in 1998. I've played jazz in downtown Santa Fe, gone to the Santa Fe Opera, eaten great Southwestern food. It has its own architecture. And I have these memories. I'll never forget black bears running across in front of my car at 6 a.m. at the top of Sierra Madre, or the wonderful drive to Cimarron on a two-lane 1930s highway through the mountains, and of course skiing with my family at Red River. I've hiked and walked in the desert in the middle of the night by myself. You know, there's a dryness in the desert that saps the water right out of you. If you've ever been to Big Bend, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes, though, at 4 or 5 a.m., there's a mist that settles down on top of the desert, and it's moisture for cactuses, for hummingbirds, and for an hour or two before the sun rises, it's cool and refreshing. There's a blue cast to this mist that I've always found fascinating. And there are these steep, narrow, dry riverbeds. They call them arroyos. And maybe you remember Yosemite Sam and those Bugs Bunny cartoons where there's a thunderstorm in the mountains, and within 1 minute you have these walls of water racing down these dry arroyo riverbeds. So that's a backstory. When I talk about backstory, it's a personal experience that I draw on, that I love, and a connection that I have. In 2008, I'm reading something on the internet about New Mexico, and I find this composer grant from the University of New Mexico. It's called the J.D. Robb Foundation. That's him up in the upper left. He's a fascinating guy. You know, I have these individuals I really admire. They're fist fighting, they're streetwise, and they're intellectuals, like John Huston, the director of Treasure of Sierra Madre, or Chris Christopherson, who was a Rhodes Scholar but gave it all up just to be an actor and a singer and a songwriter. And of course, Georgia O'Keeffe, a fierce warrior and independent woman who chose New Mexico as her home. Well, J.D. Robb had a PhD in composition from Yale, a law degree, a successful law practice in New York City, and he was an accomplished cellist. He threw it all out the window and chunked it all and was a gaucho cowboy in Argentina in the late 1940s. Somehow he ended up in New Mexico and taught music at the University of New Mexico. He became the director of the music department and the dean of the Fine Arts College. This is in the early 1950s. There used to be this company called Nagra, which made the first battery-operated, portable, high-quality, reel-to-reel tape recorder. So JD got one of these first ones and set out for the next 16 years recording indigenous music of the Southwest. He recorded cowboy songs, Mexican weddings, mariachi music, outdoor festivals, and especially lots of Native American Indian dance chants, secret ceremonies at the Indian reservations in New Mexico and Arizona. So this J.D. Robb Composer Grant wanted new compositions using one of his 6,000 recordings that he made over that 15-year period. That entire library is online if you want to research it. I sat at my computer and did research by listening to almost all of them. Maybe I skipped a few wedding songs and some cowboy love ballads, but I listened to almost all of them. And along the way, there were secret snake ritual dances, and there was a Song of the Wolf. So much interesting material. I settled on 2 short recordings, and I want to play an excerpt from one of them. Here's Ramon Herrera, a male vocalist, performing artist, a Native American Jemez Indian. This was recorded in 1957 in Cochiti, Pueblo, New Mexico. And let's listen to just a short portion of what he did. So I transcribed this. You know, it has this rhythm that he's doing with his hands, which is found all over the world in many cultures because it represents a heartbeat. and if you count that, it's 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3, or 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5. So the melody he sings is also used all over the world. It's called a pentatonic, or 5 pitches. But the way he inflected his voice was most interesting to me. And this combination set me off with a passion to further research this and invited many creative ideas to work with. So I came up with this music that I heard to complement his vocal. Here's the main theme. So the piano is really accompanying along with him a lot to a pretty groovy beat. Of course, there's piano because I'm the piano player. So I thought I'd put a climactic piano solo high point in here, which initially was inspired by these flash floods. And I came up with this. It's short. So this piece went on to win a 2011 McDowell, and I ended up being named the McDowell Norton Stevens Fellow in Composition, which was started up in because of Aaron Copeland. You know, my creative work was fueled from the very start with a love of New Mexico, but the research work to find the source materials and the willingness to sustain the effort and stay with it because of my personal stake in it, as well as the excitement of the inspiration to produce this music. You know, the next decade, well, this past decade, I ended up redefining the goals in my music. I created a mission statement. And the interest in other cultures, particularly North and South American native Indian cultures, became a way to infuse my American compositional skills into something more with a world global value. So this Two Desert Dances became a springboard for my future work and everything I've been concerned with for the last decade. So that was an example of creative writing in music, but back to jazz and my roots. I was awarded 2 Fulbrights in 2012 and 2016, and I'm a Fulbright Senior Scholar in Jazz. I've been able to travel the world representing the United States. As far as I'm concerned, I can't think of any better way to spread American goodwill across the world than in this way, and I'm very proud to be an American in this manner. Spreading American ideals and freedom across the world through art and music is a strong and influential goal, and sharing inspiration and creativity with other nations. So here's an excerpt of a concert I did in Santiago, Chile they gave me a night. It was called Texas Jazz Night. And I'm a guest artist with an all Chilean band, and my dear friend, this Chilean vocalist, Francisca Ramirez. So it's a lot of fun accompanying vocalists. I love doing that. It's been so much fun to do that around the world. Back in the States, let me share a clip of a wonderful impromptu improv. This man next to me is Jim Walker. He's the principal flute in the LA Philharmonic and my friend for a decade. His playing has become the gold standard in Hollywood. He's been in over 600 major film soundtracks. Every movie you've seen since 1980, he's probably played on the soundtrack. His artistry unlocked the door to studio and concert collaborations with everyone from John Williams or Sir Paul McCartney or to Leonard Bernstein. So here's a little excerpt from, I'm using Texas bassist Utah Hamrick, and I joined Jim for a flute master class at Texas State on a beautiful old jazz standard called Stella by Starlight. So, once I realized how important research was to me in creating, it became the integral way I proceeded. While I may have unconsciously used research in the beginning to elaborate on my first creative thoughts, with my love of something connected to me internally, I found that research had also become an end in itself. I took my 40-year association with the great jazz master Dan Morgenstern, and I received a 2019 funded NEA, that's the National Endowment for the Arts grant, to record interviews with Dan. He's the center in that picture on the left, and his lifelong friends and internationally recognized jazz historians. These included Lawrence Schoenberg on the left, the founder of the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, and Phil Schaap on the right, jazz radio broadcaster and curator of jazz at Lincoln Center. And by the way, just this year he was named a National Endowment for the Arts Jazz Master. I researched and produced videos on the amazing friendships Dan had with famous jazz musicians since the 1950s. The Rutgers University Institute of Jazz Studies named me a external research historian, and I researched and discovered among 60 boxes of uncatalogued Morgenstern memorabilia lost videos from 50 years ago, which have performances of famous jazz musicians in an absolutely fascinating, unique archive. Here's one NEA video clip I produced. Jazz master Dan Morgenstern narrates the short life history of the most famous jazz benefactor of all time, the Baroness Pannonica de Königsbarter.
Let me say something about the Baroness. Nica, she was a wonderful lady. She was absolutely devoted to the great musicians that she knew.
The testament to how important a human being she was to the jazz community is found in the fact that the greatest jazz musicians in the world wrote compositions for her. The Baroness was the granddaughter of Baron Rothschild. And she came to America in about 1955, 1956. Became very close friends with my father, along with Art Blakey, Teddy Wilson, Gigi Grice, and a number of great musicians.
Good evening, everybody. This is Nica's Tempo, and tonight we are coming to you direct from the Five Spot Cafe, and that beautiful music you hear is coming from Thelonious Monk and his quartet.
These shelves, unfortunately, tend to break the spines of the records, so you can't easily read them. These are all Monk records I'm going through, every single one.
And that's the one with Pannonica on it, isn't it?
This is really one of the great dedication pieces. This is a very major composition specifically created to celebrate the individual, as opposed to, hey, we just did a blues ad-libbed in the studio, let's name it for our friend. It's really one of the great jazz dedication pieces, as substantial as anything.
create a quiz about Nica. How many cats did Nica own?
I think it was 306.
Which legendary jazz musician died in Nica's apartment?
Charlie Parker.
What did Nica serve from a teapot?
Scotch.
When she was a child, who taught Nica magic tricks?
Einstein.
She had the Bentley, which has become famous. She was a hell of a driver. You know, she'd been an ambulance driver for the Free French in Algiers during World War II. When we got the Mary Lou Williams collection at the Institute, she and Mary were great friends. There are letters that Nica wrote to Mary, and she had the most beautiful handwriting, but she also put little decorations in different colors on top of the first page of the letter, and the way the envelopes. Mary was a saver. She saved it. That's another story. But anyway, Nica, she was a dear person, and she cared so much for the people that she was really friendly with. Coleman Hawkins, for one. I mean, that's one place where I was pretty close. So I knew how much she looked out for Hawkins when he was on his decline there. She was a terrific lady.
Hi, everybody. Very glad to be here today. I would like to play a little tune I just composed not so long ago entitled Panonica. It was named after this beautiful lady here. Merci beaucoup, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Thelonious Monk.
So that's so much fun to work on and put together and really find out about these people. So just one more. Here's Dan Morgenstern. He's been the keynote speaker at Texas State for the Eddie Durham celebration for the past 20 years. And if you're not familiar with Eddie Durham, he's one of Texas's most famous jazz musicians, and he was born in San Marcos. So let my NEA video with Dan narrating fill you in on who this fellow was.
Phil Schaff with you. With me is Eddie Durham, an amazing gentleman of jazz, pioneer of the electric guitar, stellar performer in many big band sections on trombone, the arranging and compositional pen of Southwestern jazz, and an all-around good guy.
Eddie brings some of that Western thing, which later became identified with Kansas City, becomes the name for that. We refer to it as Kansas City, but that is something that Eddie brought, which hadn't been there before.
Stellar performers on trombone.
Pioneering electric guitarist.
He is also one of the ancestors of the electric guitar, playing amplified before electric, acoustically amplified, and then being really the very first jazz player to record on an electric guitar.
Composer of the original Count Basie Orchestra. Major creator of blues themes such as Good Morning Blues and Sent For You Yesterday and Here You Come Today. He even wrote a couple of the ballad hits of the swing era, I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire, Just Want to Light a Flame in Your Heart. He wrote so much. He was a masterful genius of the arrangers who gave the flavor of musical color and style to the Jimmy Lunsford Orchestra in the swing era.
It was known as the Harlem Express. It was a great show band as well as a musically fascinating band.
What you see in that Lunsford short, where they're doing that thing where they all stand up, that was undoubtedly choreographed by Eddie Durham, because that's all his trademark. He had all kinds of moves with the trombone, with the slide that he used to do.
He arranged in the move for Glenn Miller. I mean, this guy is the guy. This cat has got the goods.
It's a pity that Eddie, you know, maybe he's up there and he's seeing it, but I think that the recognition of Eddie Durham by San Marcos, and that was of course started by the university, is unique. I don't know of any other place that honors a jazz musician like you've done.
You know, Dan is the world's most respected and beloved and accomplished jazz expert.
That's right.
And he knew, he was born in 1929, and I know you guys know all about Dan. But the bottom line is, you know, he knew Louis Armstrong, he knew Ornette Coleman, he knew Coleman Hawkins, he knew Eddie Durham. He knew, so the fact that he's been part of this program for so long and has kind of become a beloved guy on campus and all that kind of stuff, it's unique.
You know, the other thing that is every year the audience gets bigger and bigger. So the importance of what you're doing here in San Marcos at Texas State University, I'm here to tell you that this is such a special thing and that needs to be nurtured. And, you know, I just hope that the powers that be and the people that could really realize how special it is.
So, researching these short videos and the backstories of each subject really made deep connections with me to produce these creative mini documentaries. These people were my muse, and I mentioned the muse before. You know, the muse helps you find your connection, but research adds the detail, and all of it together stimulates your creative imagination. In the end, I always suggest you just trust your imagination. Don't let anything get in the way. I want to quote, I remember this quote from the UT field goal kicker, Jeff Ward. He holds the record for game-winning field goals, and he had this ability under immense pressure to just come out on the field with waning seconds in a game in a stadium full of screaming fans to just shut it all out, focus, and kick the winning goal. And when asked about it, he said, and I quote, I'll always remember this, just get lost in what you do. So, now that you know a little bit about where inspiration and creativity come from, where do you go from here? How can you stimulate creativity in your life? One of the greatest things I can suggest for you to do is to take up a musical instrument. Talk about generating new brain connections. This will do it. I've had a great number of people, adults, come up to me while I'm playing piano at a club or some kind of private event or whatever and ask me, hey, how do I do that? How can I play like that? So my joke answer is, oh, listen, just close your eyes and go for it. But in reality, I suggest you get yourself a good quality keyboard and some kind of basic book on jazz. The Jazz Piano book by Mark Levine, I can highly recommend. I have it for my students. And just playing some simple blues at the piano is a great enjoyment, something you can do for your friends, and it can enrich your mind and your life. So, folks, I'd like to invite you to come by for some great jazz at the Elephant Club at 4th and Congress, starting hopefully in August. My band, Times 10, we play the first Wednesday of every month there. So just think, if I hadn't have taken chances early on, I would have never had this thrilling life of experiences, playing all around the world, spreading American goodwill as an ambassador of freedom, as a Fulbright Senior Fellow in Jazz, creating music inspired by great people around me, playing with great musicians. And I've used research to augment and solidify my inspirations. So I wish you all the best, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Molly, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you very much. What an inspiring thing, and how honored we are to have you with us today, sir. It's been fascinating. I do have a couple of questions to share with you.
Wonderful.
An anonymous attendee. I used to have all these creative ideas, many more than I do now. Is this caused by not creating as much as before, or does creativity naturally decrease with age? And how do I go about becoming more creative again?
Right. I would say I had lots more creative ideas early on in my 30s and 40s. The mistake was I didn't write them down or keep track of all of them, and they're gone once if you don't get them down and start working on them. You have to pick the best one out of a pile of them and work on it. And that's what I mean about having the will to stick with it. It's got to mean enough to you that you're going to spend the time that it takes to finish something, to complete it. So that's that portion of it. I don't think creativity wanes with age. I think it can be developed, but I agree that you have to have some kind of impetus. That's why I'm suggesting you learn some new brain synapses. Pick up something new that you haven't ever done, so you're making parts of your brain reconnect in new ways, and it will give you sources of inspiration. But by far, the point is you want to find something you're willing to go all the way in on. So even if it's just one idea every, I mean, in the past 10 years, I guess I've had 5 good ideas. So does that maybe answer your question?
Excellent, thank you. All right, from Dale, wonderful work and greatly deserved recognition to you. There is no doubt that a variety of experiences contributes greatly to creativity. On pieces where there is a strong influence from another culture, such as the Native American with the heartbeat and use of his voice, do you give credit to the individual or culture in the print material that goes with the product? I think I'll stop right there and ask that question.
You know, I spoke in Athens, Greece, and I talked about my music to a bunch of musicians at an international conference. And I had a fellow hold his hand up and said, "This was sacrilege. What did you do to that man's music?" You know, because it was a sacred song. And I was taken aback for a moment, and I said, "Well, you know, he did sign a release in 1957 for that to be recorded." And then, thank goodness, some of the other people said, "Listen, this has been going on for decades, for hundreds of years, where a composer will take some kind of natural folk song and work with it." And I remember a girl brought up Stravinsky, The Rite of Spring, Petrushka is all Russian folk songs. And Aaron Copland did that too with Rodeo. So there's a history of artists borrowing something from another artist and working with it. So absolutely, in my printed published music, I give his credit, where the recording was made, where he's from, all of that. So for sure. And plus, I mean, he's the lead vocalist. So he gets those credits, and well deserved.
Absolutely right. Okay, good. The question continues on. There is an increased awareness of cultural appropriation in the visual art community. I was wondering how that is handled not only in your diverse work, but of course, across music in general.
I'm not sure I understand. How is art being, is it compromised?
Well, no, an increased awareness of cultural appropriation in the visual art community. In other words, giving credit when you do use inspiration from things, apparently.
Right. So that's been an interesting development in jazz, is to try to encompass more and more styles of music. So I think I mean, since the 50s, there's been people that have gone into classical music to borrow concepts and take it into jazz. There's a fellow named Gunther Schuller who wrote uh, some music based on 7 themes by Paul Klee, the artist, and uh, and it's half classical and half jazz. So that's like 1950s, 1960s, and then there's been more and more a willingness to borrow from other cultures. So, I mean, Latin American music is music from Afro-American music that came to Cuba, that came to New York City, and then gets absolved, and we have Latin jazz now. And there's Chinese music. I mean, I've had Chinese students that come and take their background and then write classical music that way. So I'm hoping for a world blend of cultures. So there's a communication among everybody. And I don't think it limits, as long as you're aware where it came from. I think it's completely worthwhile to say thank you to some a culture or a person or whatever where the source material comes from.
Excellent. All right, Betty Patterson has the question. Have you thought about writing a book about your life?
my son is leaning on me to do that. Maybe I'll get after that when I retire, but I'm not going to retire for a while.
There's certainly enough material to fill more than one book. I think that's true.
Yeah, I've had a lucky life. I mean, I remember I've had people ask me, how did all this happen? And you have to get prepared for luck. That's what I say. If you're ready to go. So now, I haven't mentioned playing with Christopher Cross in these Grammys or the Academy Awards. So I played with him in high school, and we were in a high school band, etc. But when it came time to audition to play in his band, I was given this just ridiculous piece of music to try to learn. It was handwritten, and there was coffee stains all over it, and it was nothing like what I was hearing. So I had learned to actually transcribe note to note for anything I could hear. So I wrote it all out, and I was prepared. So when I went into the audition, I played it just like the string orchestra did on the recording. And they all went, "How did you do that?" I said, "Well, I listened to it, and I was hired because I was prepared in advance for the luck." So that's where I think actors say the same thing. It's not, you're just not discovered instantly. It's because you put the 10 years in advance on it.
I think that's an excellent answer to that one. We have another one. Thanks for the talk, from John. I have enjoyed it. Can you speak about your connections with young people in the field? Do you see yourself in them?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's why I'm going to stay and not retire. I love working with my kids. They come in with some preconceived things. Sometimes they've got their own ideas, and I foster that. But other times I go, okay, there's some stuff you still don't know about, and we'll work on something like that and expand them. And I'm all behind backing them and giving them opportunities. So I'm finding jobs for them. I'm showing them classical things they would have never thought about, and trying to expand their awareness. So, and then I love playing with them too. So I play at my university. We have master classes where I play and then also during auditions. We may have 30 jazz musicians come and audition once a year, and in order to audition, they audition while I'm playing with them. So there's a lot of I mean, I feel super connected to the youth of the 20s, in their 20s.
All right. Well, one of my questions was, what do you teach at Texas State? What kind of classes or individual lessons, or what is it that you do?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm really in several different fields. So I teach jazz piano one-on-one. I teach legitimate composition, where people write music for orchestra or for string quartets also several of the composition students want to learn how to write jazz, and they can't get that from anywhere from me. So I have composition students. I'm also pretty technically oriented, which is why I'm a video producer too. So I teach a graduate and undergraduate class in music technology. And then just a month ago, I've been invited to teach. We have a Latin music studies course, both undergraduate and graduate. And so I've been asked to teach the Latin, I keep saying jazz, but just Latin piano, Latin music piano, like you would play in a salsa band or in a mariachi band. So that's got a lot of rhythm to it, and I'm going to really have to study up on that over the summer, so I'm ready for that in the fall. But so that's a big variety. Plus, I'm the technical support person, so we have 70 faculty, and if they have any kind of problem with their computer or their internet or their email, guess who gets that phone call? Me. So I stay busy.
Full-time job just right there, I'm sure.
You betcha.
Thank you. We have another one from Amanda. How was your date with Cheryl Ladd?
Oh, how funny. Okay. All right. So we're on tour with Christopher Cross for years. We had, on the way back from Japan, we stopped for 2 weeks in Hawaii, and we only had one show to play. Now, I'm a distance runner, and I would get up at 5 a.m. every morning, and I would run out to the beach and take a left and start running. And one morning I did it, and the sun's coming up, and the road disappeared into this park in Hawaii. It's outside of Honolulu. And I'm running along, and there's a TV crew there, and they're doing TV, and I'm running past, there's girls in bathing suits and everybody, cameras everywhere. And finally this guy goes, "Hey, you, what are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm running." He said, "You can't be in here." And I said, "Well," so on the spot I said, "I play with Christopher Cross. I'm the piano player. We're doing a concert in 2 nights, and I came here to invite Charlie's Angels for free backstage passes." And the guy goes, I can't say it, but he basically said, "BS, get out of here." But one of the models was there, and she said, "Wait a minute, just a second, let him in." And I ended up going to 3 Charlie's Angels or something and said, "Hey, ladies, you're invited to a concert, free tickets, whatever." And so they came to the show, and afterwards, backstage, Cheryl Ladd came up to me and said, "Hi, how are you doing?" And this is going to be funny. We sat down and had a cup of coffee, and we might have talked maybe 30 minutes, and she made sure to show me her engagement ring. And so we had a really nice time, but that was my date with Cheryl Ladd.
Great story. Great story. Well, I'm now a ×10 fan thanks to your incredible video. That I've seen a lot of those during the pandemic, but I have to say yours was one of the best I've ever seen. Absolutely kept me engaged with the listening process. So really awesome work. How do we get performance date info? Is there like a ×10?
Yeah. There is a ×10 thing on Facebook, but you could also go to the Elephant Club, and they have a calendar.
Okay.
And it's the Elephant Club, and it's a very famous, it's the oldest jazz club in Texas and one of the oldest in the nation. And they have a calendar, and if we get back, if nothing happens, we should go back, I think, in July to a performance schedule. And I think, because most of us are in that band, most of us are professors and teach at various universities, we'll probably play in August. And we play the first Wednesday of each month.
Okay. Well, how fun that you all are all mostly professors. What a cool way for you to keep your chops up while you're teaching, right?
That's exactly right.
I also wanted to ask about your Eddie Durham. Is that a festival? What is the event?
It's called the Eddie Durham Celebration, and it's the first weekend of every February, and it's been going on for 20 years, and it's held at Texas State University. And as I mentioned, he was born and raised in San Marcos, so there's a museum about him downtown San Marcos, and he's our prodigal son. And so there, I can definitely send you the dates for that, but it's held every year. We were somewhat only online this past February, but it will definitely go back. It's got a big band that plays his music and Count Basie's music, and I mean a big band is 19 players, so all of those players are several UT jazz professors and various great players from around Texas that come in and play that.
And where is it held?
It's held at Evans Auditorium, which is the major auditorium on the Texas State campus.
All right, excellent. And since there are no more questions from others, I get to ask you about your experience with Baryshnikov.
Oh, how cool. Okay. So I get called. I mean, boy, I got so many calls. I mean, that's how I played with so many people. So I get the call to come and play the reception after the inauguration of the UT Performing Arts Complex, which is, I presume, was about 1983, 1984. And the guest artist, most of all, was Mikhail Baryshnikov. And the day of the celebration, he says, "Hey, I can't dance. I'm sorry, I have a sore in my back, or my back is sore. I can't dance." So it ended up being a lot of people just having lots of drinks outside on the terrace, and I'm playing piano out there. And who comes up at Mikhail Baryshnikov? He says, "Okay, let's do something." So I started playing, and he did some tap dances, and I can't remember. He might have tried to sing some song. He doesn't sing jazz. I think he's tried to sing Hook 'em Horns or something. But he was a very gracious guy, very funny guy, and he had to bow out if anybody went to that. So instead, we made up something on the spur of the spot. Yeah.
Well, that was quite the phone call for sure. A memorable.
Yeah.
Well, I want to remind everyone to come back again to this exciting seminar next week to hear about director approaches to Shakespeare in the United States from Dr. Charles Ney. He's a professional director, author, and professor in the Texas State University School of Theater and Dance, and he created and headed the department's Masters of Fine Arts in Directing program, a program recently featured in American Theater magazine. We will definitely have a real treat next Thursday. Again, thank you so very much, Professor Hehmsoth. What an incredible afternoon you've given us, and we appreciate your inspiring presentation. And thank you to all of you for joining us this afternoon. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you, Molly.
That was amazing. I loved it.
Thank you so much.
You're the best. I could listen to it all day.
Great, you must like jazz. Thank you so much.
Thank you.